Written history tells us the Cary House Hotel was built 167 years ago in 1857. Still standing and operating today, this Placerville landmark has hosted many historic and notable guests over the years. Saw over $90 million of bullion go through during the gold rush and the silver boom of the Comstock, was a Wells Fargo stage stop, and is said to be one of the most haunted sites on Main Street. We'll see. That's what written history tells us. Let's listen to living history. In 1911, the hotel was purchased by the Raffetto family, who owned and operated it for 68 years.
Well, I'm Daniel Raffetto, born and raised here in Placerville. We had an old hotel in Placerville. It was called the Cary House, and my grandfather bought it. He remodeled it, the Cary House, and there was originally no heat in the Cary House. It was heated by a couple of, about 4, I think, wood stoves. There was no basement in the original hotel, so he had a basement dug. And while they were digging, they found gold, which changed a lot of the work schedules for the individuals. The gold was mined, and then they got quite a bit of gold. We had the basement, and then my dad put in steam heat in the hotel, which he also added the top floor, so he made a 4-story hotel out of it rather than the original 3-story. Put an elevator in and added restaurants, coffee shop. Yeah, there wasn't much in the city of Placerville. That obviously there was no hotel, and it became a pretty good draw for people traveling through, people traveling to mostly up to the Lake Tahoe area. They could not make it all in one day. They needed a place to stay, and the hotel was there, and it turned into a nice hotel. They did not put a lock on the front door. They wanted it open. It was a 24-hour business. They had the night clerks, and it was good for business. And the hotel was open 24 hours a day, and we had desk clerks that worked different shifts and worked it as I say around the clock. So they enjoyed the lobby. There was a lot of conversation and business that went on in the lobby. Born there, not in the hotel, but in the hospital. And I spent the next 50 plus years in the hotel. Saw a lot of changes, and an interesting venture for me. My mom and dad had a nice apartment.
Dano has fond memories of his 50 plus years living in and operating the hotel. He is especially fond of memories of notable guests that became family friends.
As time went by, there a lot of people like to come up here and stay, and some of the folks came up from Hollywood when times were better. There were a lot of the movie stars came up, and I think primarily to get away from the hustle and bustle of Hollywood. And I had the good fortune of meeting most of them. A good friend of mine, Randolph Scott, stayed here stayed at the hotel. Came back many times, even when he wasn't filming. Frank Morgan, Reginald Owen was a character actor that practically lived in the hotel. He came up quite often. John Steinbeck was a good friend of my mother's and Dad. Steinbeck wrote most of his books in the area. He would write a lot when he was in the hotel. We had some property in the back, and he used to go up there and sit and write again. And the hotel became known pretty much for the hospitality that it had.
Kurt Raffetto, fifth-generation El Dorado County resident, remembers his young days when he hung around the hotel, helping out Mom and Dad, taking care of things like operating a switchboard and more.
I'm Kurt Raffetto, and we own the Cary house, or as I knew it, the Raffles Hotel, the first 14 years of my life. We'd had it a long time before that. My grandparents lived there. I spent a lot of nights there, and they actually lived there after we sold it, because we got them a life estate. I grew up working behind the desk and stealing candy from the counter once in a while, and taking my friends by. I'd have to work for it sometimes. My grandparents had a fireplace in their room, and I'd take wood up to them, and I would occasionally enlist my friends from the basketball team and have them carry some wood up with me. We had to walk it up though, because it was too hard to get in and out of the elevator where you had an armload of wood. Basement Dad talked about with where all the heat came from and the boilers, and Dad would drag me down there to help him work on something. I was usually the one holding the flashlight. It was hot, and there was water in these wells on the floor and fire doors down there that used to scare a 8 or 9-year-old when he's down there with the flashlight looking around, and Dad would holler at me, "Put it back over here where I can see what I'm doing." But I just wanted to make sure those fire doors didn't close on me. So, a lot of great memories. My friends would enjoy it. Dad talked about the parties that my grandparents would have. When my grandma used to host a bridge party, and she'd have 8 ladies in her small apartment up there, and I'd bring in 4 of my buddies, and we'd find our way around the tables just to get into the kitchen, so we would grab something to eat. It was originally the Placerville. It was originally the Cary house, and then the Placerville Hotel. My great-grandfather bought it, and my grandfather was on an around-the-world trip. He'd spent quite a bit of time in Singapore and developing Singapore cold storage. He was sent over there from UC Davis. He kept going and ended up at Harvard for a little while, and then his dad wanted him back to run this new hotel in the 20s. Well, when my grandfather was in Singapore, he stayed at the Raffles Hotel. And the Raffles, of course, kind of went with our name, Raffetto, and he just changed the name. Now, I don't think today with the internet and world travel you could get away with that. But we called it the Raffles for about 65, or probably 55 of those 65 years that we owned it. You know, I would help my grandma out at the desk. She would work for during lunch periods and dinner breaks for our regular employees that were working the counter. And I'd answer the phones, and it was an old switchboard, and the room would light up, and you'd plug a wire into that. And if they wanted to talk to another room, you grabbed a wire and plugged it into that. Or if they wanted an outside line, you pick that up, dial the number, have guests. I would, when I could, I'd take bags up. Occasionally we would have power outages because the power was all based on old fuses. While Dad was fixing that, I'd be using a flashlight to take people up to the rooms. But it was neat. It was a going place. The Cedar Room was the restaurant. I enjoyed it. We used to go there for Sunday brunch, or I'd eat my dinner out at the counter at the front desk if my grandma was working and I was getting hungry as a young teen boy would. So.
When it was sold in 1979, the name was changed back to the Cary House. In 2024, the Cary House still welcomes guests to Placerville with a mix of modern conveniences and comfortable accommodations shared with a sense of over 160 years of history. Standing in the historic lobby, one can imagine what the good old days might have been like with horse and buggy pulling up in front for guests to check in. or the early days of the 20th century when one of those newfangled automobiles would cause quite a stir on Main Street. While the Cary House would sit at the top of the list of oldest continually operated hotels in California, the decision to dig a basement to install steam heat moved it down the list. But the fact that the hotel was rebuilt using the original bricks still stands as a notable and somewhat historical feat.